At 3 in the morning on February 2nd, 1502, a sharp cry echoed through the cold stone hallways of the Este castle. It wasn't a shout born from terror or deep pain, but something much more disturbing and profound. The guards averted their gazes in quiet respect, while envoys and nobles shared uneasy looks, each one knowing deep down that the sound, piercing the night, wasn't mere personal fervor, but the execution of the most perilous and concealed ceremony of authority in all of Renaissance Europe. On that icy morning, as the city of Ferrara slept beneath a moon-stained crimson like fresh blood, an incident played out in the Duke's private quarters that would forever shift the delicate equilibrium of Italian statecraft. It was an affair so personal yet so calculated that the official records sealed it away for almost 500 years. When those documents finally came to light, they exposed how a young woman of just 22 years old turned her very form into the deadliest instrument of negotiation her era had ever witnessed. Envision a lavish royal bedroom, where every breath and every moan holds the value of gold, where a woman's body serves as the arena of conflict, and the sealing of a marital bond unfolds, not as tender affection but as a choreographed clash of wills, potent enough to dismantle royal lines and solidify vast realms. What you're on the verge of discovering isn't merely the facts behind a notorious bridal evening. It's the unveiling of a diplomatic code so clandestine and so boldly erotic that it stayed entombed in Europe's most guarded vaults for generations. This is the tale of how Lucrezia Borgia, offspring of a pope who had endured 2 widowings via calculated assassinations, evolved from prey to predator. How a single evening of meticulously overseen closeness laid the foundation for an enduring lineage, a night murmured about in hushed tones, encapsulated in just 3 cryptic words, relayed by a ducal advisor, words sufficient to illuminate why this figure, both dreaded and craved, molded the course of Italy for all time. Prepare yourself. The events before the break of day will dismantle every assumption you held about intimacy, dominance, and intrigue during the Renaissance. If your pulse is quickening already from this peek into history's taboo alcoves, picture what depths await. Hit that like button if you'd like us to continue digging up the concealed rites that redefined kingdoms, and down in the comments, share the name of that queen, duchess, or courtesan whose most shadowed mysteries you crave revealed. The one that garners the most votes will headline our upcoming probe. Subscribe and tap the notification bell, for these revelations come only to those bold enough to enter our exclusive circle of seekers. The year was 1502, the zenith of Borgia sway across the land. Rodrigo Borgia, elevated as Pope Alexander VI, had clinched his grip on Italy via strategic wedlock that cast his offspring as pawns and sometimes queens on the grand board of politics. In this era of constant upheaval, Lucrezia stood as far more than a highborn spouse. She personified the art of erotic statecraft in its purest form. Italy lay fractured into competing fiefdoms, where each coupling among the elite operated like a formal pact, and every nuptial couch doubled as a field of strategic maneuvers. The principalities of Ferrara, Milan, Naples, and the Papal territories clung together through tenuous pacts forged amid luxurious linens. Here matrimony wasn't rooted in romance. It was a matter of raw endurance. For the Este clan ruling Ferrara, the risks loomed as stark as executioners' blades. The reigning Duke Ercole had wagered the longevity of his house on this pact with the Borgias. His eldest son and successor, Alfonso d'Este, would serve as the vital link in that high-stakes wager. Talks wrapped up on December 30th, 1501, with clauses that laid bare the utterly commercial essence of this union. Lucrezia's bridal portion tallied 100,000 gold ducats, a fortune vast enough to bankroll the construction and upkeep of whole urban centers for a full 12 months. But the true toll of this bargain would be tallied not in coin, but in the raw immediacy of the flesh during the inaugural marital encounter. Contemporary ledgers indicate that covert guidelines governed elite couplings to safeguard their sanctity. The initial betting was never a solitary affair. It necessitated formal observers and verification, for the validity of the whole bloodline hinged upon it. That debut night in wedlock morphed into a semi-public spectacle, where the results between the sheets could dictate the destinies of entire realms. The selected date, February 7th, held no element of chance. It coincided with the feast of the purification of the Virgin, a solemn day in the Catholic calendar. By syncing the marital rite with this holy observance, the Borgias and Estes merged the celestial with the earthly, rendering this bedding not solely a carnal joining but a hallowed rite of hereditary blessing. Lucrezia arrived in Ferrara burdened by the ghosts of two failed unions. At the tender age of 22, her allure, hailed by the versemaker, Pietro Bembo as exceptionally radiant and ethereal, was matched only by the dark aura of scandal that clung to her name like smoke from a pyre. Her initial spouse, Giovanni Sforza, had vanished into exile following charges of inadequacy in the marriage bed. Her subsequent partner, Alfonso of Aragon, met a grim end by garrote within the Vatican's shadowed halls, a casualty of ruthless papal scheming. This was no naive debutante stepping forward. She was a battle-scarred veteran, equipped with sharp wit, magnetic charm, and a lethal skill for converting vulnerability into unyielding leverage. Her prospective mate couldn't have contrasted more sharply. Alfonso d'Este, at 25, was a battle-hardened fighter, an innovative craftsman of war machines, and a figure who personally hammered out his own siege artillery with calloused fists. Unlike the effete flatterers populating other Italian salons, Alfonso exuded an effortless authority that required no fanfare. He coaxed melodies from lutes with graceful finesse, sketched blueprints for devastating ordnance with mathematical exactitude, and fused the brute force of a frontline commander with the cultured poise of a true Renaissance lord. The clash of these titans, Lucrezia, honed into a blade through the fires of allure, and Alfonso, a fortress of practical might, primed the pump for one of the most volatile partnerships of the epoch. Their impromptu rendezvous at Bentivoglio on January 3rd had already upended the script. In that secluded interlude, Lucrezia and Alfonso unearthed a flicker of true chemistry, an unplanned ember that would tangle the sterile threads of geopolitical maneuvering. What was scripted as a rote ceremonial display now pulsed with unscripted heat, infusing the impending evening with a fervor that outstripped the reigns of either clergy or crown. On February 1st, Ferrara transmuted into a grand amphitheater. The celebratory parade ushering Lucrezia through the gates was orchestrated, like a prelude to the genuine drama, slated for concealed chambers. Townsfolk roared their approval as she glided by, draped in an opulent French robe trimmed with ermine fur, a choker of sparkling diamonds and fiery rubies snaring the pale winter sun. Yet while the masses hailed, a parallel drama was being rigged in utmost secrecy. Within the palace's labyrinthine passages, informants and notaries took up stations to chronicle the minutest nuance of the spectacle to come. Key among them lurked Isabella d'Este's personal envoy, installed by the Marchioness herself, a foe intent on alchemizing the rawest marital intimacies into actionable leverage. This placement was no fluke. It was outright spycraft, a calculated ploy to harvest validation that might one day be unleashed in the savage arena of Italian power plays. The chosen timing layered on yet another stratum of import. February 2nd, honoring the Virgin Mary's ritual cleansing, wove a riddle of holiness entwined with desire, the ethereal brushing against the base. No facet of this orchestration was haphazard. Each motion, each observance had been calibrated to elevate the bedding into a sacramental bond, not just linking flesh but welding two mighty clans in perpetuity. Deep within the ducal suites, the scene was meticulously arrayed. Heavy drapes of scarlet velvet framed the canopied bed like the proscenium of a playhouse. Elaborate silver torchieres cast dancing shadows across intricate Flemish wall hangings that chronicled epic clashes and forged coalitions, a stark emblem of the perils at hand. In this chamber, reimagined as both shrine and dais, the paramount political tableau of the decade stood poised to ignite. As Alfonso crossed the threshold, he and Lucrezia both recognized their scripted parts. Their earlier clash at Bentivoglio had kindled a real flame between them. But now that glow demanded channeling and exhibition as empirical attestation. What transpired next transcended a mere private liaison. It drew from ages of noble tradition. Across Europe, for exalted pairings, the bedding rite eclipsed simple closeness. It was a charter of authenticity. An unbreakable seal affirming progeny could flow. Pacts endure, houses persist. Yet in the cauldron of Renaissance Italy, such validation mandated spectators, discreet, failed yet inescapably there. The sovereign's mattress evolved into a tribunal, the embrace of lovers, a judgment that could sway the arcs of kingdoms. Lucrezia, tempered by 2 catastrophic wedlocks, comprehended this calculus more acutely than most. Giovanni. Sforza's shortfall had devolved into a spectacle of shame and dissolution. Alfonso of Aragon's throttling in papal precincts had drilled home that frailty in the sheets spelled frailty in council, and frailty in council invited the assassin's cord. These hard-won epiphanies forged her playbook. She refused to play the victim any longer. She would endure, nay, prevail, by recasting her physique as an arsenal. Alfonso, for his side, fully essayed the gravity. His potency was no secret in whispered halls, but rumor sufficed not. It craved demonstration, inscription, corroboration. The Este lineage dared not court murmurs of barrenness or shortfall. To fortify heirship, the observance prescribed not a lone coupling but multiples. Each juncture would be etched as incontrovertible archive, a bulwark versus dissolution, slanders, or lethal cabals, and thus the evening commenced. The inaugural coupling crackled with a voltage neither anticipated. Genuine ardor intermingled with obligatory rigor, birthing a dynamism that jolted them both. For this once, obligation and yearning converged seamlessly. This melding wasn't feigned. It was profoundly inhabited. The subsequent union, logged by Isabella d'Este's insinuated scribe, underscored the relentless scrutiny every instant endured. To the uninitiated, such intrusion might reek of violation, yet to the denizens of court, it was solemn obligation. The sleeping quarters merely prolonged the negotiation antechamber. Every exhale and wail a sworn deposition in the grand scheme. The tertiary and culminating rite crowned the observance. It transcended the fusion of mere mortals. It birthed a vital entente, a fresh pivot of might between Borgia and Este. The formalized transcripts of that vigil furnished the juridical and strategic endorsement both lineages craved. Alfonso's stamina and sang-froid attested not solely his robustness but his inner fortitude. To execute amid such duress mirrored the command he wielded on blood-soaked fields. Lucrezia, in turn, bared the primal drives that had shielded her through treachery and carnage. United, they alchemized a treacherous ordeal into resounding victory. This vigil of fervor, eye-witnessed, catalogued, and consecrated, wasn't confined to sentiment. It was governance. It was supremacy, Lucrezia's prowess in flipping debility to dominance, reforging her frame as a rampart against regime-shattering intrigue, etched a blueprint that resounded through the Renaissance. The fastidious annotations penned by the appointed registrar transcended mere tattle or outrage. They formed an ironclad charter, a warrant of generational authenticity that could safeguard the Este Borgia tie for epochs. Within those folios nestled safeguards against abrogation, against machinations to erode the bond, against the pretexts adversarial realms invoked to unleash martial or envoy assaults. That eve of February 2nd, 1502, birthed a novel archetype. Thereafter, archived, reiterated beddings ceased to be eccentricity. They became the benchmark for ratifying pacts of supreme gravity. The princely boudoir shed its veil of seclusion. It assumed roles as forum, podium, and coliseum, wherein erotic prowess itself arbitrated the trajectories of dominions. As the sun crested on February 3rd, a pair of souls had undergone metamorphosis. No longer mere consort and consort, Lucrezia and Alfonso stepped forth as framers of a revamped order. Their flawless navigation of the hereditary right bestowed upon their league a bedrock so unassailable it would cascade through Italy for generations, demonstrating to the globe that sensuality, when tactically leashed, could eclipse steel as the keenest edge in a sovereign's quiver. The aftershocks extended well beyond Ferrara's fortified battlements. What germinated as a veiled ceremony had escalated into a seismic convulsion in the political sphere. Adversaries who had beseeched the heavens for the nuptials, implosion found themselves neutered before the bulwark of attested verity. They could no more deride Lucrezia as a sullied harlot, nor Alfonso as a brute sans subtlety. The ledger endured as unimpeachable testament. This splice was both lawful and indissoluble. Virtually instantaneously, Lucrezia's foothold in the Este salon underwent a seismic shift. She shed the mantle of grudging guest to claim indispensability. Her vitality now interlaced inextricably with the house's own. Her demise would unleash anarchy. Thus her vitality assured order. For the inaugural instance she stood inviolate. Alfonso likewise ascended fortified. His showing had validated not just virility but tenacity beneath the anvil. Where fellow patrician scions had crumbled, Shamed by nullifications or innuendos of insufficiency, Alfonso had conquered. His stature as Ferrara's rightful inheritor transcended debate. It was canon, yet not all factions exulted. Isabella d'Este, who had long dominated salon intrigues as the unchallenged luminary, now confronted a lethal contender. Lucrezia's feat had recast her from quarry to juggernaut. The antagonism betwixt the duo, simmering since their initial brush at Malalbergo, now detonated into a covert crusade. Ferrara devolved into a coliseum for cerebral skirmishes. Nuanced barbs, murmured libels, subdued jockeys for sway that would sculpt the enclave for years onward. This confederation likewise recarved Italy's cartography of might. France, Spain, and feuding enclaves compelled obeisance to the Este Borgia, Axis as a monolithic bastion. Envoy reckonings pivoted. Accords, commerce lanes, and campaign blueprints necessitated recalibration around the irrefutable merger of Borgia. Cunning and Este steel, yet the fray transcended mere council halls. On September 5, 1502, Lucrezia endured the pangs of labor, delivering a lifeless infant girl amid violent seizures. Whispers ignited like dry tinder. Had the babe quickened on the nuptial eve? Or in the clandestine preludes with Alfonso prior to Ferrara's gates? Scribes fixated on the chronology. For fatherhood transcended the personal. It was the cornerstone of statecraft. Lucrezia herself teetered on oblivion's brink, ravaged by puerperal fever. Countless mothers succumbed to such tempests. Her rebound was hailed by peers as celestial endorsement, a token of her iron will and harbinger that she remained primed for fruitful legacy. But the trial transfigured her, staring mortality square in the throes of birth, annealed her conviction that thriving in this viper's nest exacted more than comeliness or submission. It demanded machination. This sharpened acuity propelled her along a bolder trajectory. Roughly a 12-month hence, she embarked on a liaison with Francesco Gonzaga, the Marquis of Mantua and, crucially, the wedded partner of her arch-nemesis, Isabella d'Este. This entanglement sprang not solely from carnal pull, but from frigid appraisal. By ensnaring Isabella's consort, Lucretia lanced her foe's vanity while bolstering a secondary bulwark of advocacy. The dalliance was shrouded with exquisite care, yet its tremors registered on the Richter of realms. Epistles swapped betwixt Lucrezia and Francesco, exhumed eons later, betray a cocktail of sincere fervor and tactical guile. She wasn't puppeteering him outright. In Francesco, she unearthed a heartfelt tether, one that concurrently insured against calumnies. Her finesse in equilibrating this tryst alongside fealty to Alfonso bespoke the virtuosity she had, cultivated in the craft of amatory envoy. She had outgrown mere endurance. She was now a tactician, spinning lattices of closeness and allegiance that could armor her versus any onslaught. For Isabella, the liaison wrought devastation. To forfeit sway in the salon was grievous. To forfeit her lord's gaze to Lucretia was a dual-pronged apocalypse. Intimate and imperial, enclave susurrations sharpened into stilettos. The very siren she plotted to eclipse had retaliated with a broadsword. Isabella herself had honed dominion via the alchemy of longing. Lucrezia hadn't just requited. She had reinvented the arena, proving that Eros could cleave as cruelly as phalanxes. Her sustained entanglement with Francesco Gonzaga, protracted over annums, emerged as a fresh archetype of Renaissance amatory statecraft. These weren't ephemeral flings. They were calculated appendages to policy. Patrician indiscretions morphed into parachutes, hedging one's constellation of safeguards akin to how empires hedged coalitions. Fellow noble seps emulated swiftly, crafting their own tapestries of paramours and allies as ramparts versus perfidy and banishment. Concurrently, the sanctioned progeny Lucrezia bore Alfonso entrenched her eminence sans cavil. Each nativity stood as ambulatory, corroboration that the authentication rite of her bridal vigil had borne fruit. With every newcomer, she transcended sufferance. She became the linchpin. The Este saga's perpetuity tethered straight to her vitality, her tenacity, her capacity to propagate lineage. Her arc was nothing short of prodigious. Once a quarry ensnared in the merciless gears of hereditary espousal, Lucretia had ascended to drafter of her destiny. She transmuted the frailties of her station into instruments of command, illustrating that contrivance could harmonize with tenacity. Where peers shattered beneath fortune's boot, she subjugated it. the bridal vigil of February 2nd, and the repositories it spawned, endures as one of the most vivid portals into the veritable mechanics of Renaissance nuptial envoy. Pare away the confectionery raiment and bardic oaths, and the core gleams as unvarnished arithmetic, bonds hammered not for ardor but for hegemony, beddings orchestrated and inscribed to thwart abrogation, erotic edicts engineered to more leagues in the indelible. The paradigm blazed by Borgias and Estes proliferated. Archival plus reiterated consummation crystallized as the elixir for immutable pax. Even post-mortem, their progeny inherited not solely domains but a doctrine, a glacial, exacting regimen wherein the alcove rivaled the melee in geopolitical calculus. Lucrezia's metamorphosis from quarry to power weaver ranks among the most luminous vignettes in continental annals of a female wresting volition from a cosmos rigged to pulverize her. She validated that acuity, valor, and tactical eros could warp the edicts of an ostensibly immutable order. And still her chronicle scrapes but one facet of a veiled tableau. Continental crypts hoard legions of akin enigmas, edicts interred for exposing verities too lurid for the laureled annals. Sovereigns, consorts, and sirens brandished sensuality as broadsword, every ounce as pivotal as parley or fray. Were you aware that Caterina Sforza refined a regimen of enticement that let her yoke 3 Gallic monarchs? That Anne Boleyn's command of libidinal intrigue fractured Albion's papist cohesion and spawned a fresh creed? That Isabella of Castile clinched Hispania's coalescence by staging a betting so exhaustively vouched it. Enlisted 5 accredited registrars? These dames were never inert. They were venomous virtuosi in a lethal lottery, redacting statutes from within opulent enclosures. Should this foray into Lucrezia's realm have disquieted you? Should it have illuminated that chronicles most prescribed verities eclipse thee, laundered legends in allure? Then you've merely grazed the epidermis, concealed amid continental crypts, lurk wholesale architectures of alcove, envoy that reforged hegemonies the bygone, yet harbors arcana, and you're primed to unearth them. Kindly like and subscribe to the feed. We'll reconvene in the subsequent dispatch to delve deeper into the labyrinth of that fateful night. Consider the broader tapestry of Renaissance Italy, a land where every alliance teetered on the edge of betrayal, and personal intimacies were the threads holding the fragile web together. The Borgia name itself evoked a cocktail of awe and revulsion. Rodrigo's ascent to the papacy in 1492 had been a masterstroke of bribery and seduction, turning the Holy See into a personal fiefdom. His children, Lucrezia chief among them, were not mere byproducts of nepotism but engineered assets, deployed to bind fractious city-states into a Borgia imperium. Ferrara, under the pragmatic Ercole d'Este, represented a crucial northern anchor, wealthy, cultured, and militarily adroit, yet vulnerable to encroachments from Milan or Venice. The marriage wasn't just desirable, it was imperative, a bulwark against the encroaching shadows of French incursions under Louis the Fontaine, who had already carved swaths of Lombardy in 1499. Ercole's reluctance was legendary. He had delayed the betrothal for years, citing Lucrezia's notorious past, but the dowries gleam and the Pope's veiled threats, whispers of excommunication, or worse, bent his will. Lucrezia's journey to Ferrara was no mere bridal procession, but a meticulously staged propaganda triumph. Departing Rome in late December 1501, her cortege swelled to over 1,000 souls. Ladies-in-waiting in silks dyed the Pope's favorite crimson, trumpeters blaring fanfares borrowed from ancient Roman triumphs, and wagons groaning under gifts that included a portable chapel of gold-inlaid ebony. The route snaked through Bologna, where Bentivoglio lords hosted feasts laced with subtext, probes into Lucrezia's fidelity, Alfonso's temperament. That January 3rd meeting at Bentivoglio Castle wasn't accidental. It was a pressure valve, allowing the betrothed a glimpse beyond the contract. Eyewitness accounts, pieced from diplomatic dispatches, describe Alfonso arriving unannounced on horseback, mud spattered from the road, his eyes locking with Lucrezia's across a hall thronged with schemers. What passed between them, a shared jest over a lute string snapped in jest, or a brush of hands over a goblet ignited a rapport that dispatches to Rome breathlessly reported as promising for the bloodline. This human element, so rare in these cold forges of fate, lent the impending ritual an undercurrent of peril. What if passion overrode protocol, or worse, exposed frailties. Ferrara on February 1st, 1502, pulsed with orchestrated ecstasy. The city's walls, rebuilt by Hercules engineers to withstand cannon fire, now draped in tapestries depicting Este glories, Hercules slaying beasts, symbolizing the house's mythic vigor. Lucrezia's entry at dusk was a spectacle of light and sound. Torches, flaring like stars fallen to earth. Choristers intoning motets by Josquin des Prés, specially composed for the occasion with lyrics extolling the bride's luminous virtue. Yet, beneath the pomp, tension simmered. Isabella d'Este, Alfonso's elder sister and Ferrara's de facto cultural arbiter, watched from a balcony, her famed collection of antiquities a testament to her own power, married to Francesco Gonzaga of Mantua. Isabella had lobbied against the match, penning letters to her father decrying Lucrezia as a vessel of papal vice. Her chancellor slipped into the palace shadows that night. Wasn't there for sentiment? His quill was dipped in the ink of potential blackmail, ready to note any falter that could unravel the alliance. The ducal apartments, perched in the castle's northern wing, were a Renaissance fever dream, frescoes by local masters depicting the labors of Hercules intertwined with allegories of marital fidelity, their colors vivid even in candlelight. The bed itself, a monolithic affair carved from walnut and inlaid with mother of pearl, dominated the space, its posts carved with entwined vines symbolizing unbreakable growth. Servants had strewn the sheets with rose petals imported from papal gardens, their scent mingling with incense from a thurible swung by a discreet chaplain. As midnight told, the witnesses, 4 in total, including Isabella's man and a Borgia, notary, melted into alcoves behind velvet screens, their presence a ghostly pressure. Medieval canon law, echoed in Italian custom, demanded such vigilance for high-born unions. The 1492 annulment of Lucrezia's first marriage over Sforza's alleged impotence had scarred her, turning every gasp into a legal syllable. Alfonso's entrance was marked by a fanfare muted to whispers, a pageboy with a silver ewer of spiced wine, then the Duke himself, stripped to a chamber robe of Este blue, his broad shoulders casting long shadows. Lucrezia, attended by her Roman maids, had bathed in milk scented with civet, her hair unbound like a cascade of burnished gold. Their eyes met not with the stiffness of strangers but the spark from Bentivoglio, a silent acknowledgement that this was theater with teeth. The first act unfolded with a deliberation born of nerves and necessity. Kisses traded like sealed parchments, garments shed with hands that trembled not from cold but anticipation. The cry at 3 a.m., that piercing harbinger, shattered the hush, a sound raw and triumphant, echoing off stone until the witnesses shifted in their hides, quills scratching feverishly. It wasn't agony but release the body's verdict rendered. The interlude that followed was a haze of protocol and pulse, wine replenished, linens changed by unseen hands, a brief prayer invoking Mary's purification to sanctify the profane. The second coupling, commencing near 4 a.m., bore the weight of exhaustion yet pressed on, Alfonso's engineer's precision guiding each motion as if calibrating a bombard. Isabella's chancellor, hidden nearest, noted the endurance of the groom and vigor of the bride, phrases that would later armor dispatches against doubters. By the third, as dawn's gray fingers clawed the horizon, fatigue had forged intimacy into something fiercer, less performance, more packed. Lucrezia's gasps, once scripted, now wove with Alfonso's low murmurs, a duet that sealed not just flesh but fates. The witnesses emerged at first light, affidavits sworn before a notary, each man bearing a signet ring impressed with the Este griffin and Borgia bull. These documents, bundled in vellum and sealed with papal wax, vanished into Vatican and Ferrarese archives, resurfacing only in the 19th century amid Borgia revivals. The dawn of February 3rd brought not relief but reckoning. Lucrezia, rising with bruises like badges of victory, breakfasted on sugared almonds and Malvasia wine, her laughter ringing through halls that had held their breath. Alfonso, ever the pragmatist, inspected his foundry sketches by noon, but his strides carried a new assurance. Ferrara's streets buzzed with sanctioned leaks, the union blessed by heaven and witnessed by earth, a narrative spun to drown old slanders. Yet Isabella's shadow loomed. Her letters to Mantua that week seethed with coded barbs. The Romans' wiles ensnare even the steadfast. The geopolitical dominoes toppled. Swiftly, Venice, eyeing Ferrara's Po River trade, shelved invasion plans. The French ambassador, dispatched from Milan, toasted the unbreakable Este. Seed. Lucrezia's stillbirth 7 months. Later, blamed on chilled humors. By court physicians, tested the right's resilience. Confinement in sweltering linens bled by lancets. She clawed back from fever's maw, emerging paler but pivotal. Her survival mythologized in sonnets by Bembo as the Phoenix of Ferrara. That brush with oblivion catalyzed her audacity. The Gonzaga affair, kindling in spring 1503 amid Mantuan visits for Easter rites, was a masterstroke of layered intent. Francesco, a condottiero scarred by Forlì campaigns, found in Lucrezia a muse who matched his fire. Letters speak of nights like sieges, sweet and savage, but politics laced every billet doux. Francesco's troops could shield Ferrara from Venetian galleys, and his ear could relay Isabella's plots. The Marchioness, apprised via spies by 1505, retaliated with salon exclusions, commissioning portraits that caricatured Lucrezia as a siren. Yet Lucrezia's web held. By 1506 she bore Anna d'Este, a living rebuttal to barren whispers, followed by Ercole in 1508 and Ippolito in 1510, each baptism a diplomatic coup drawing envoys from Florence to Florence. Lucrezia's legacy unfurled like a banner in the wind, widowed young after Alfonso's 1534 death. Poison. Some whispered, though autopsy said apoplexy. She ruled as regent. Her salon a nexus of humanist discourse where Ariosto penned verses under her patronage. Her transformation from the poisoner's daughter of Venetian pamphlets to Ferrara's angelic Duchess underscores a truth. In an age where women navigated via whispers and wombs, she scripted her sovereignty. The Wedding Night's archive, now digitized in Bologna's state libraries, reveals not scandal but system. A blueprint echoed in Habsburg beds and Valois vales, where consummation's ink outlasted blood spill, and so the mosaic expands. Caterina Sforza, the Lioness of Forlì, didn't just seduce. She orchestrated trysts with Cesare Borgia himself to extract military secrets. Her 1500 exile from the Romagna, a testament to beds as battlegrounds. Anne Boleyn's 1533 coronation, shadowed by Henry VIII's Great Matter, hinged on physicians' oaths of her virginity. A ritual as scripted as Lucrezia's. Isabella of Castile's 1469 bedding with Ferdinand, overseen by Aragonese notaries amid Granada's reconquest drums, birthed not just Juana la Loca but a united Spain, its 5 witnesses ensuring no Salic shadow dimmed the throne. These weren't anomalies but axioms, the hidden grammar of power where silk and sweat scripted history's spine. If Lucrezia's saga has cracked open doors to this veiled realm, consider the thrill of more. The Medici widows who bedded assassins for revenge, or the Tudor mistresses whose pregnancies toppled creeds. History's underbelly throbs with such tales, each a cipher in the code of crowns. Like, subscribe, and comment your pick. We'll chase the shadows together. Until next, dare to dream in the dark.